its inevitability in the evolutionary way, in some ways. Anyway, she's here to give us
Before I start speaking, I'd like to know if there's something you want to know about Auroville, the deeper meaning of Auroville. Is there a question you'd like to put out so that I can also start to respond to that? Is there something anyone would like to say, ask, suggest? No? Okay. In one of Mother's remarks about Auroville, she says, for those who are satisfied with the world as it is, Auroville has no reason to exist. The raison d'etre of Auroville begins when you begin to say, oh, something's not right. Now, often people choose Auroville for various reasons. In the early years, in 1968, many of the people who came here from the West particularly were revolting because after the Second World War, the 50s was a time for things to settle down. The 60s, the new generation just exploded with rejections, questions, a sort of a search that was dissolving the social agreement a little bit. And those who came to Auroville in the early years, often those who came here from the West were rejecting many things. Often it was easier to say no to things than to know what you wanted to say yes to. But Auroville is a huge, complete yes. But it's a yes to a future that we have to create together. You could almost argue that since human beings began to think, since intelligent thought came forward in human consciousness, we have dreamed of a perfect society. In every corner of the world, you get these ideas of a social order that would be much better than it was at present. So in some ways, human consciousness is not satisfied when it asks questions with the way things are organized at present. Human beings are gregarious animals. They like to live in groups, but the group arrangement is never ideal. So in many ways, the question about how society is organized has been present from the earliest times. The aspiration for something beyond human beings has also been present from the earliest times. In the Veda in India, it was as if there was a pursuit. We live in bodies that die, so death is a question. What is death? This is a question that the human mind asks. Is there a way to change this? What is life if we don't know what is death? It almost comes together. So this question about what is death and the pursuit of immortality emerges in many corners of the world. Amrit, Amritam, the need to go towards that direction, you will discover it in hymn after hymn, in verse after verse, from the earliest ideas that have been recorded of human thought, which is in the Vedas. In the West, you have Plato, who's written a book called The Republic, where he imagines a new society. He creates all the ideas that would create this society. He banishes the poets, because poets are disruptive. So in his Republic, the poets would have no space. Later, in the Middle Ages, when the Renaissance was exploding in Europe, you had Sir Thomas More in England, who imagines a place, an ideal place, but he calls it utopia. He places it nowhere. Utopia means nowhere. Then you have something that begins to happen, particularly in the West. The idea has been present in the East in a much more profounder manner. But in the West, it began to express itself socially, politically. Also because the Abrahamic religions were much more structured and they demanded a revolt against them. But between the Reformation and the Renaissance, many questions emerged. Many ideas emerged, ideas about society and reorganizing the society. And this led in France to the French Revolution. And the ideas of the French Revolution were liberty, equality, fraternity as a social arrangement. The idea of freedom, the idea of equality, the idea of brotherhood has always been present in the deeper consciousness of human beings. But can it be created socially? This was the first experiment that happened in France with the revolution, but unfortunately the revolutionaries were forced to add a fourth term to it. And the fourth term they added was or death. So the most active element in the first 5 years of the revolution was Madame Guillotine. And every single revolutionary lost his head to her. So what is going on? The moment we dream these wonderful dreams, we actually end up destroying them by the very pursuit of them. There is a paradox in human consciousness that needs to be looked at. About the same time, you have the American War of Independence and the Declaration of Independence. And the first sentence says, "We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal." Absolutely right. Couldn't be a better argument. But the man who wrote these words possessed slaves. So again, you have this Thomas Jefferson, wonderful character, but he had slaves. He did not consider the slaves to be equal. When the American Constitution was created by the young and new republic, it put forward wonderful ideas, but the people who put them out definitely were considering men, not women. Women didn't figure at all. And men of property. You could not vote, you could not be a citizen, a voting citizen of the new United States if you didn't hold property. So the others were considered not good enough. Again, we talk about equality, but it has never been inclusive. It's always been exclusive. So the 20th century, a century which has been the bloodiest in terms of large-scale wars. There's always been war in human evolution, but these were large-scale wars that involved many parts of the world. So you can argue that the 20th century was the bloodiest, but it was also the century where many things were being churned and looked at. Already at late 19th century, many of the ideas that informed the birth of Auroville were present in the public discourse. You had Baron de Coubertin, who was thinking of trying to find a way to end wars, and he says, okay, let's get everybody to fight on the sports field. Let's not have battles where people kill each other. Let them compete in sports. So he looked back at history and he found the Olympic Games of ancient Greece to be a very good way to bring the world together. And so the modern Olympics were launched. If you look at them today, they have been completely subverted by commercialism and other aspects, but the dream behind remains. So you have this vast dream of unity, human unity. And if you look at human evolution, it has surfaced at different times, in different climes, in different ways. So there is something in human consciousness that doesn't let go of this dream. But certainly after the last century that we've lived through, we know that it's nothing to do with culture, it's nothing to do with self-development. It's because you can be cultured, you can attend concerts in the evening, you can be highly developed in music, art, poetry. In the Second World War, many of the Nazi leaders had that capacity, but their day job was murdering people in factories. So what's going on with human nature? We have dreams, but they do not translate into life. There is a problem with life. Auroville addresses life. It's life itself growing and perfecting itself. And again, not in a uniform, organized manner, not a prescriptive manner in which somebody tells you this is how you should live your life. each one in their own way, but aiming to grow, aiming to develop, aiming to widen your consciousness. So to come to Auroville is not to come to an easy life. It's to come to a great effort. The field is always yourself. It's not, you don't change society. You change yourself, and in the process, everything changes around you. That's basically the core pursuit of Auroville. But it's a collective realization. So if you sign up for Auroville, India has, from time immemorial, offered a wonderful idea force of oneness, that every atom, every electron, every molecule is divine. Sarvam khalvidam brahmanasti. Everything is that. Each electron is a chariot of Shiva. What does that mean? We are one. We are already one. We've forgotten how to do it. So, tat tvam asi. You are that. Aham brahmasmi. I am that. We are all that. But we've forgotten it. India also offered a very organized, systematized, methodized effort to understand that, which comes under the generic term yoga. Yoga is merely and it's not a system of exercises. There is a yoga that addresses the body as the instrument, but equally every instrumental part of your nature has a yoga that addresses itself to that. So you have Hatha Yoga, which takes the body and the breath as the instrument, but the aim of Hatha Yoga is to change consciousness through immobility, through breath, but to arrive at a change of human consciousness. Jnana Yoga addresses your intellect. Karma Yoga addresses your action in life, in doing, you change yourself. Bhakti Yoga takes your emotional center into being. This is the Trimarg that the Bhagavad Gita offers. So India has offered many of these ideas from the very beginning. Raja Yoga takes the whole mental personality and tries to change it. There are steps, there are methods, there are structures, but unfortunately in India, the whole program of yoga was addressed towards leaving the earth. Liberation was in another sphere, outside this human body. The body has to be abandoned. It's mithya, it's maya. Liberation, moksha, is in another plane of consciousness. But that's not very satisfactory. Why do we have this great big universe if the whole intention of perfection is to abandon it and leave it? But that's what India offered. So the program is there, it's methodized, it's organized, but it's all to get out of life. Life has to be abandoned because you can't change it. With the changes that were happening in the world, another idea was coming forward, and the idea was life affirming. Modern science in some ways has grasped life and tried to make sense of it. Matter, life, tried to make sense of it, understand it, and we have developed a certain level of mastery over it, but the instrument that uses it remains selfish and self-conscious and completely focused on the self. So we are now a pygmy consciousness dealing with powers that are way beyond our capacity. Something's not right. Sri Aurobindo began to write his ideas, and these ideas have been present from the most immemorial times. You come across them in the Upanishad and the Veda. There is an argument that says that this world comes from delight. That is one, bodied forth into multiplicity for the delight of being. And to experience that delight, you have to find in your consciousness that oneness. And the true consciousness is a consciousness that is delight, an experience of delight. Unfortunately, one of the ideas that took over the delight idea was the world has come from desire. So you have to abandon desire, transcend desire, and abandon life, and find liberation elsewhere. So this little turn, philosophical turn, has the world come from desire? Has the world come from delight? Can change your response to life completely. In Auroville, we say the world has come from delight. We follow Sri Aurobindo's perspective, which argues that this human aspiration to create a perfection on earth in a human body is not an irrational, irrelevant, lotus eating kind of idea. It is real. It is what the intention of human evolution is, and that the human being is not the last rung of this evolutionary ladder. We tend, because we are selfish, self-centered, egoistic, and we look at the world from our view, and some of the religions have encouraged that perspective, we tend to look at the universe as if it's been created for us. What if the fish, the wild boar, the lion was as important as us? What if we are just one more step in the evolutionary ladder? What if evolution continues and humanity, the mental consciousness, is merely a transitional being? That's the basis of Auroville. We argue that human consciousness is transitional, the mental consciousness is merely one step in an evolutionary process. The mind will be surpassed. The mind is merely an instrument. It is not who you are. You are a soul inhabiting a body which is an instrument, a life which is an instrument, and a mind which is an instrument. Here you get a difference between the Western perspective, which has created this efflorescence of physical science, and the Eastern perspective, which has been much more esoteric. Descartes in the West says, cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. I exist because I think, and because I think I can know that I exist. But the Indian perspective says, and this is the most ancient Indian perspective, it's when you stop thinking that you really are. You have to transcend thought and arrive at a deeper space. Again, that is what is Auroville's pursuit. So you can, this was my I've gone very philosophical this time, I'm afraid. Is that okay for you all? Okay, I'll come to Auroville now. This is kind of the philosophical basis of Auroville. How do we explore Auroville? I will look at the charter and I will try to engage with these philosophical ideas through the charter. Okay, so that's the background. Auroville is hugely, completely life-affirming. It absolutely rejects any kind of exclusivity. It begins where religions end, and it is in pursuit of perfection in matter, in life, and in body. And the only way you can do that is to find your soul, who you truly are, behind your outward appearances. Whichever background you come from, you have a cultural, religious, social, language, whatever that's just your instrumental self. Your true self transcends all that, and that's where the oneness exists, and that's where the brotherhood exists. If you look at the French Revolution till the present, there have been social experiments on a countrywide scale which have tried one or other of these great master ideas, these mantras that were brought forward by the French Revolution. The pursuit of liberty, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is the American argument. The pursuit of liberty is the capitalistic model, where everyone's free to become whatever they're capable of being, and if you're not that capable, well, too bad for you. You had the liberty to do it. If you didn't succeed, that's your problem. Immediately, it creates inequalities, huge inequalities. The number of those who get abandoned and don't fit into this kind of a model are very, very present to be seen. Don't get focused upon because we are all pursuing a capitalistic model in the world, but there is a lot of people who fall through the cracks. So there have been other experiments. that pursued equality much more. The Bolshevik Revolution, the Maoist Revolution, the whole leftist movement, the whole movement that says, look, society needs to be made right, it has to be organized. The first thing you do when you do that, when you try to create a social change by a social or a political device, you've got to take people's freedom away. And that's what happened with the Bolshevik as well as the Maoist revolution. The first thing that was removed was people's right to choose. It was chosen. It doesn't work. The pursuit of liberty, the pursuit of equality doesn't work. We see that in today's world. In the new millennium, you have to be very blind if you can't see that none of these social experiments have worked. They've been very interesting. They're worth studying, and we should study, in Auroville, we should study them profoundly to understand what Auroville represents. Well, the base of this triangle is fraternity, is brotherhood. But brotherhood cannot be created by social and political devices. Brotherhood exists in the soul, and you cannot create a social arrangement based on brotherhood unless you first go inside and find a new level of consciousness that allows you to do it. So Auroville is squarely based on this inner journey to touch that level of brotherhood and oneness that exists in the soul spaces of your consciousness, and then Auroville is born. So Auroville exists in a fraternity of collaboration, but each one choosing individually. So you all are joining Auroville. You will notice that Aurovillians don't tell you too much. My kind of talk is not what you're going to get in the next 3 days. You're given it for 1 hour, and that's about the dose you can be given. After that, you're left to find your own way towards that. Auroville is not a place for activism, for fixing society. The problem is you. You're here to fix yourself, and that's the best contribution you can make to society. Because the measure in which you change your consciousness, the world in yoga psychology, the world is a mirror of your own consciousness. If you see, the Isha Upanishad says, how can anyone who sees oneness everywhere have suffering? Ka moha, ka shoka, ekatva manupashyati. If you see oneness everywhere, you cannot suffer because you see the same divinity everywhere. You get a new kind of perspective on the world. So Auroville is a field for change of consciousness. Now, how does one achieve that collectively with no hierarchy, with no boss telling you this is how you do it? We have structures, but they are evolving structures. And if you look from the time 43 years ago when I came, you had to be particularly crazy to come to Auroville. Nobody chose to come to this desert where a whole bunch of mad foreigners had settled this desert land. And okay, I came from a middle-class Indian society, and everybody thought you're crazy to do that. Today, it's not like that. Today, Auroville is a bit in fashion. People are looking at it all over the world. We've achieved something. We've greened the environment, but we haven't achieved that real thing that we are here for, which is the change of consciousness collectively. Yet, there are certain things in place. And how have those things come in place? They've come on the basis of the charter. So now, how am I doing time-wise?
Very good. It's fine. Very, very good.
Okay, now I go to the charter. The only thing that is given to us as a structure is this mantric 4-point Auroville Charter. It was announced to the world on the 28th of February 1968. It was read in a whole bunch of world languages, and it was translated before the inauguration, and different voices read it. And a boy and a girl put a handful of soil from their countries into the lotus urn that is at the center to symbolize human unity. And that's what Auroville's 4th point says. Auroville will be a site of material and spiritual researches for a living embodiment of an actual human unity. In India, we say mantra is a set of words put together in a poetic arrangement where every word is of significance. You cannot discard a single word. So I'm calling the charter a mantra, and the mantra that guides us on our journey. So let's look at each word. Auroville will be a site. It's a physical piece of land. In fact, probably in the history of humanity, there has never been a publicly announced piece of land supported by a government dedicated to such a pursuit, where the whole world has been invited to participate. That's pretty unique. A site for material and spiritual researches. Generally, when we create the opposition, we say, okay, this is matter, this is the spirit, and they stand at two ends of our conscious spectrum. Well, the research in Auroville has to be carried out in that whole gamut of ideas, idea forces that exist between material research and spiritual research. A site for material and spiritual researches for a living embodiment of an actual human unity. We talk unity. The United Nations is an example of an attempt for human countries, nations, societies to talk unity. Actually, we don't live it. Auroville has to live it. Auroville has to embody it. Auroville has to materialize it. You cannot fake this one. It has to either be or it isn't. So we are far from achieving this, but we are en route. It's like in a 1,000-mile journey, we've done a step or two. Third point of the charter, I'm going backwards. Auroville will be a bridge between the past and the future, taking advantage of all discoveries from without and from within. Auroville will boldly spring towards future realizations. Again, every word is pretty interesting. A realization is something that you embody. It's not an idea, it's an embodiment. So we have to create future realizations. Generally, human society manages with the past. We tend to try to understand the past. All our study in school is whatever is past. The textbooks are generally outdated. By the time they get to the schools, they're already 20 years outdated. Cutting edge research. Now with the internet, we can keep up with what's happening a little bit in the world, but we are looking at the past. We don't really have much energy to look at the future, but Auroville has to boldly spring towards the future. It has to be a bridge between the past and the future. So these are very visual images that Mother has given us, and they embody, they represent programs of action in life and in thought and in living that Aurovillians have to do. So we are a bridge. We have to leap into the future boldly, and we have to realize whatever that means. So this is again something that we have to meditate upon, we have to reflect upon, we have to dwell upon. In the end, whenever you're a bit lost about Auroville, go back to the charter. That's the program, that's the dream. It is a dream. Mother called Auroville a dream. The second point of Auroville's charter, Auroville will be a place of unending education, constant progress, and a youth that never ages. In the 60s, when UNESCO was coming up with some sort of a formulation for the right kind, the ideal society, they called it learning to be. That every society, to be in the rhythm and the elan of whatever is required from the present to the future, it has to keep learning. You cannot just take tradition from the past and settle for it. In any case, if there is something in the tradition that's interesting, it has to be reinvented in forms that work for the present and allow you to leap into the future. A society that learns. If we remain as we are, a learning society, which can only be created with a sense, every person who comes to Auroville is a student, has to unlearn his or her past, has to learn the lesson of the present, and that way you cherish eternal youth, because youth doesn't depend on the number of years you've lived. Youth is an attitude of consciousness. You will notice that Aurovillians tend to give an impression of youth. Even the 90-year-olds continue to work. People don't retire in Auroville, so if anyone is considering Auroville as a place of retirement, bad idea. There is no retirement in Auroville. As long as you are able-bodied, you need to work, contribute towards the collective. As long as you can contribute towards the collective, you will learn something that you need to learn on that day for the future. You do not obsess about the past, you find a way to make it a power for the future. So unending education, constant progress, and a youth that never ages. You know that in the early years, Aurovillians, I'm going to actually give some practical history, I'm being too philosophical. We were so radical that there was a period when all the schools were closed down. No schools existed because everybody said, oh, this is the past, mental education. We're not supposed to be mental beings anymore. So, oh, elettromontal was like a epithet to put someone down. If you were a mental being, you were not good enough for Auroville. Aurovillians were life beings who were changing the ground and planting trees and doing practical things. Auroville did not need thinkers. It's true, Auroville doesn't need thinkers. Auroville needs conscious beings, so that's valid still. But since then, we've ended up with a lot of schools. So now there is an argument that it's too schooled. Perhaps the kids don't need to be schooled so much. So always, always, always there's a debate going on in Auroville. What is the ideal kind of scenario for schools? There's a whole spectrum of attitudes that say we have no right to allow the children to grow up without certification. So now Auroville has a few schools that offer, we don't have a school board which is affiliated to any kind of organized system. But you can study for an A-level, O-levels, or for a CBSE in one of the Auroville schools and go and pass an exam. But it's not 100% satisfactory, so there is also a lot of experimentation going on. Mother talked about free progress. She said, I don't want this old disease. She called it a disease. She said it's what's happened with utilitarianism. The last century has been a century where the most dramatic philosophy that's taken over the world is utilitarianism. I don't want this disease in my ashram. She's talking about the ashram at that time, and the school. Those who want certification go elsewhere. Here we will follow a free progress system. So the ashram school, Dinesh is an alumni of the ashram school. Anyone else from the ashram school? No, okay. Rajendran is from the Auroville school, but the ashram school has never given certification. And it's been in existence 70 years now. And it has seeded all of India and maybe other parts of the world with its graduates. And hopefully they're bringing some sort of a consciousness of the right to risk, to try something different, to change the social order. In Auroville, it's more debatable because we are also a much more mixed bag, and if any of you are parents, I warn you that you will be happy with your kids till about the age of 10 or 12, and then suddenly at 12 years you will flip out and say, what am I doing to my children? They need certification, which is what has happened all these years. So generally parents are fine with the younger schools, and then they say, no, 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 our kids need certification. I happen to have taught in a school which is free progress. I have refused to compromise, but there have been times when we've hardly had students. Today we have 40 kids, and that's like, wow, people are choosing to try alternatives, but generally people have preferred to be safe and structured. But to give you an example, how are we doing time-wise?
20, 25.
Okay. Are you finding this interesting? Yeah, it's okay, everyone? So to give you an example of how we need to relook at education. When I started teaching about 33 years ago, and I noticed that a French friend of mine was doing French literature, I was doing English literature, and we would talk at tea time and we would be puzzled about something. These were kids, I started to teach in the teenage high school of Auroville when the teenagers said, enough is enough, stop experimenting with us, give us a school. So La School reopened after it had been closed for 10 years. La School reopened for teenagers in 1985 when I started to teach. And well, we were teaching English and French and math and science and all that. We were not teaching history. We noticed that the Auroville kids had no sense. You know, she's doing Ruy Blas, or she's doing Cyrano de Bergerac, and I'm doing Shakespeare, and I'm doing Hamlet. And I noticed that, you know, when we're talking about a revenge play, and it's very Christian, Hamlet. And they don't understand. They don't understand the drama of it. They don't have a sense of sin, the Auroville kids, because the kids have grown up totally free of any kind of religious idea. So we said, oh dear, we have to start a comparative religions course. We have to do some history. We have to make them understand the human condition. So the first time we started history in La School, all the teachers divided the world amongst themselves. You know, we started from ancient India. I got ancient India. Somebody took ancient Greece, up to the present ancient China, whatever. And we began to learn it again from the perspective of Sri Aurobindo's social evolution. So Sri Aurobindo has written these three fabulous books called The Human Cycle, The Ideal of Human Unity, and War and Self-Determination. It looks at the world and human evolution psychologically. It's not how we were taught history. So we had to relearn. All of us were the first students, and the kids were our guinea pigs, and we were experimenting on how to do this. I'm just giving you this story to tell you that every subject has to be re-looked at from the perspective of a society that wants to leap into the future and not to be held down and burdened by past ideas. Even though there are some fabulous ideas in human past, but we have to reform them into ideas that can allow us to leap into the future. We have to take what modern science has to offer, because Auroville is not rejecting anything. It's taking everything into consideration, but in an Aurovillian spirit. So at every stage, in every human life, with every thought you have to measure it against the Auroville idea. And that's a long process. In the early years, we used to joke a lot about, all of us who came to Auroville believed we were international. We were human beings who were looking at a universal future. And then we discovered that the French were really French. The Germans were really Germans. They could almost not sit in the same room together. They would argue immediately. The way their jokes, nobody could understand each other. The Indian, I was going to say, all les Indiens. The French would say, all les Indiens. So, you know, you get apostrophed as Indian. And then it became North Indian. I mean, you know, we constantly label ourselves because it's true, we carry the burden of our social environment, our educational environment, our family environment. And sometimes we have ideas we don't even know we have. So it's when you're shocked awake by some sort of a negative experience in Auroville that you say, oh my God, I need to relook at that. And that's what's happened to Aurovillians. That's how Mother tricked us into committing ourselves to this experiment, because we did not understand that we were the guinea pigs and we were having to work upon our own consciousness. And we stopped pointing fingers at each other and we would do better. We have to work upon ourselves. We don't have to change the world at all. So Auroville is not about changing the world. Auroville is not a social experiment. It is a social science experiment. It's an experiment in trying to evolve a new society, and the first person sitting in the center of that evolution is you and your consciousness. So you've got to look at yourself very strongly. This is just to say that point 2 of Auroville's charter about unending education is addressed to you, to each of us. We are the students and we have to evolve that eternal youth, right? Auroville is an educational experiment. When people ask me what is Auroville, I said it's an educational experiment. So people say, oh, you're saying that because you teach. No, it is each of us is a student. And we never stop being a student. Mother started Auroville at the age of 90. And she joked, she says, you know, I am much older than all of you ashramites. Imagine launching an experiment at 90. And then not giving it too many prescriptive guidances. What she said was, my approach to Auroville is a pressure of consciousness. So let us hope that still today there is this pressure of consciousness that's demanding that we change, each of us, in our own way. And that is the best contribution we can make to Auroville. Now I come to the most esoteric, the most inward of Auroville's charter's points, which she put first. Auroville belongs to nobody in particular. Auroville belongs to humanity as a whole. But to live in Auroville, one must be the willing servitor of the divine consciousness. When this charter was being translated, Mother was very keen that, this is at the time of the Cold War, she was very keen that the Russians, the Soviet bloc, the ambassador would read that, the Americans would read that. It seemed that it had reached, the ideas that were behind Mother's experiment had reached Khrushchev in the beginning of the 60s and had reached Kennedy also through a friend of his. So some of these ideas were percolating into the social arrangement that was there, which was frightening. Remember, it was the Bay of Pigs, there were nuclear arms that were, you know, anybody, they almost had their finger on the nuclear button. People were organizing themselves in America to hide in nuclear shelters, and it was crazy. We are not under that kind of pressure anymore, even though a whole bunch of nuclear weapons exist in the world. Somehow we don't feel so obsessed with them. But in the 60s, people were obsessed with them. So when the Soviet ambassador saw the word divine, he says, we've removed this from our society. There is no such thing as divine. So the person who was in contact with them said, well, what would you be happy with? Would you be happy with perfection? He said, yes, we are trying to create a perfect society. Fine. The divine is supreme perfection, supreme beauty, everything absolute that you can dream of, the best you can dream of, that is the divine. So Auroville wants to serve that consciousness. It is the best of everything you can dream of. That's the divine. And more than that also. So willing servitors, you know, when you come to Auroville, you're very willing. And after a while, when you get the blows of society, and it's very easy to lose the willingness. Everybody but you is wrong. People can really upset you. And that's part of the process of Auroville. If you are not suspended in midair with nothing to support you but your faith, you're not going to change. You've got to abandon your past and you have got to leap into the future. But that process of leaping is to be suspended, like a trapeze artist. So you are out of your comfort zone. And if you can embrace that outness, then you're in the spirit of Auroville and you will remain willing. You will remain of service and servitor. The modern world is not very happy with the word servanthood. We've lost the beauty, the joy, the exceptional gifts that service brings. And Auroville is a place of service. You have to serve a fabulous, complete, total idea. Not yourself, not your ego, certainly, not your idea of what the world should be. That's being a willing servitor of the divine consciousness. And the first part, Auroville belongs to nobody in particular. When Mother was formulating that, she says, by the way, she's not thinking it. Things come and she notes them down and then she weaves it together. There's a wonderful conversation in the agenda in February 1968, where she's making this charter, and I recommend you read it because it's so delightful. She's asked some of the people who are working with her to create Auroville to formulate some charters also. So there are two very intelligent human beings who have formulated these charters, and she's looking at them and she's looking at her own bits and pieces and how she weaves it together. It's very funny. I recommend you read it. However, when she says Auroville belongs to nobody in particular, she says it doesn't really mean anything, because there is no such land today on earth that doesn't belong to somebody. We are part of the Republic of India. The lands are part of the Republic of India. We are subject to the laws of India. But what is so fabulous is that the government of India has supported us, not interfered too much, passed 2 acts of parliament to help protect Auroville. Finally, the lands have been vested in an autonomous body. This is not ideal, because we've ended up paying too much of attention to this autonomous body, the foundation office. There's a big office there, and yet they don't interfere in our day-to-day life. We've been left free in all these years to create what we need to create in the moment when it needs to be there. Nothing is ever ideal in Auroville. No organization quite works. So if you feel critical about it, don't worry, the Aurovillians do also. We're all subject to the circumstances that we as human beings are capable of doing. It's the best we can do in any circumstance because of the arrangement of energies and forces and attitudes. But this idea of not belonging is addressed to each of our consciousness, the sense of ownership. We've got to work on our sense of ownership, the sense of acquisitiveness, the sense of possession. And that again cannot be fixed by a social device. It's a sense of growth of consciousness. So Auroville is a place of yoga, of self-evolution, of self-development. Yes, you can come to Auroville to plant trees, and the tree planters have done a fabulous work. You can come to Auroville to help develop ideas in terms of culture. Auroville is a very wonderful environment for people who are artistic and creative. But in the end, you cannot be an artist in Auroville, you cannot be a tree planter in Auroville, you cannot be a teacher in Auroville. You're a field of action for growth of consciousness. It's just what you do. Teaching is just something I do, and it becomes a means for me to do yoga. The last message that Mother gave to Auroville in 1973 was, Auroville, I'm not sure I have the words exactly. Auroville is based on the karma yoga of work that Sri Aurobindo taught, and everyone who comes to Auroville must take up a work and do it as a yoga. So whatever you do in Auroville becomes the yoga that you are following. And actually, it's a marvelous gift that Mother has given Auroville, because it's when you work and you get hit by 1,000 not very harmonious forces that you make your progress. Because we rub against each other and we soften the edges, the rough edges, and we become like smooth stones rolling down this great stream that is the evolutionary journey of Auroville. One thing is certain, if you fall in love with Auroville, as I did many years ago, it spoils you for everything else. Nothing else, nowhere else in the world do you get this particular arrangement of energies and forces and this particular kind of collective realization. Anyone can pursue Sri Aurobindo's yoga individually on their own, but Auroville is an experiment in collective realization. So all of you, you are looking at the fact of joining Auroville. Please recognize this very strongly and see what this means for your consciousness, because it's a profound commitment. And if you can make that commitment and hang on to the joy and the delight of the journey, then you'll be happy in Auroville. But happiness is not the aim, it's the result of your consciousness. So if you remember that, pursuit of happiness, which the Americans talk about, you cannot pursue happiness. You can pursue a profound aim, and that will give you happiness. Questions?
I have a very more obscure question. I am confronted by this question of consciousness. And I am not a scientist, but the scientists say consciousness itself is matter.
That's what.
And we are,
Yes.
are we the dense formation of consciousness? And consciousness contains everything. Whether it is metal or human body or plant.
You know, science can tell you a lot about how things work. They can't tell you why.
This body, after that, we burn it. Where it is going? It is absorbed in consciousness.
Yeah.
Everything, that our intellect, our all sorts of attributes, it goes where it is disappearing. This is the question that is confronting.
Where does it go? If it's everywhere,
Do we have a scope or idea to form, at least to further understand about it?
the whole aim of Auroville is growth of consciousness. Now, what does that mean? Is growth of consciousness. Growth of consciousness. To grow in consciousness. But there is no limit to the growth of consciousness. Can you, okay, there are, according to, I'll give you Sri Aurobindo's answer. If let's accept the scientific argument of the Big Bang. There was a singularity. We don't know what was there before, but out of nowhere, there was a Big Bang. If you, as an uninstructed observer, was present at that moment of that Big Bang, in terms of consciousness, you were present, and you were observing it, would you have predicted that today we would be sitting here and talking about it? There is no explanation that science offers for why that singularity has led to this present moment. So what is the trajectory of this? And are we the end? Is this the end? Is death the end? I asked this question at the beginning. I don't think anyone giving you an answer will be satisfactory. You've got to discover these answers in the depth of your consciousness.
I am sorry if I am speaking more. But our eyes, it comes from the consciousness, it is absorbed. If you take a sponge or a piece of water and put it in the water, it absorbs. When we are conceived in the mother's womb, again we are absorbing all that consciousness, we do not know from where it is coming. In that context, I have a quest for understanding this. I don't have any other vocation now.
Please read Sri Aurobindo. Please read Sri Aurobindo's Life Divine, and please read Sri Aurobindo's Life Divine, which is a magnum opus that addresses all these questions. If you are interested in a philosophical approach to the question of consciousness, the Life Divine, I cannot give you the answer. I am too unimportant in terms of, okay. But if you're interested in poetry, I recommend Savitri. Savitri gives these answers to another state of consciousness, to the visioning, the dreaming, the imaginative side of your consciousness. You've got to figure out what kind of a mind you have and what kind of answers would satisfy your mind. I can't help you there. You've got to figure this one out. Right? Okay. Anyone else with a question?
I wanted to ask.
Yes.
The 3 books that you mentioned while you were reading, when you all thought of rediscovering, I'm not rediscovering, but introducing history to the students in a way, Sri Aurobindo's books. So
It's called the Sri Aurobindo's Social and Political Thought. It comes in a single volume. Social and Political Thought. those are his ideas about the psychology of human evolution. They're addressing the psychology of how human society has evolved. Okay?
It's just one particular.
No, you can get it in one volume. You can get them as 3 separate books also. They're available in Wild Seagull as well as in Sabda and Pondi. So either you get the full volume, which is 3 books, or you get these 3 individual. Yeah? Okay. Anyone else with a question, or it's time for your lunch? It's quite a dose. It's, huh?
We have 5 or 10 more minutes.
Okay. Yes.
What is your meaning of activism? Because I don't know, for me, mother is the biggest activist that I know, and the way you have said, like, no, I will not give certificate. For me, it's an act of activism.
Yes, but it's addressed to me, and I cannot force someone else to do this. Often look, there is a great deal of work to be done to change human society, and I respect and admire the people who are trying to do that. I'm only saying in Auroville, we can't change each other. We've got to change ourselves. So when I say no, I'm not going to teach certificate education. It means that for 30 years, I've had students I love who've come to me and said, can you help us to do the A levels? And I've said no. So I've had to make some choices. I don't mind studying as much as you like. We'll study literature together. But I'm not going to prepare you for the exam. You prepare yourself. So it meant I had to make certain choices for myself. I had no right to impose it on another. In that sense, I'm talking. Often, I'm only talking about Auroville. You're right. It's a very activist kind of thing, but activism addressed to your own consciousness, if that makes sense for you. But if I'm sitting at the town hall and trying to change the way Otto is running the financial service, or that kind of activism, let's do without.
But when you do an activism, you take stand, then it affects the other people around you as well.
True, but it meant, in my case, I gave you the example of teaching, that for a while, nobody was coming to law school. And I hung on to this idea that I'm not going to let this idea die. It meant my friends began to say, you're crazy. Why don't you stop doing this? And I'm stubborn, I'm a bit of a donkey, I hung on to the idea. So it meant certain things for my life, which I'm not sorry I hung on to. If you have questions about what you're hanging on to as a fixed idea, after all, the third great idea that comes out of India, I said the idea of oneness, Sarvam Khalvadam Brahmanasti, the idea of yoga as a methodized effort for self-perfection. The third great idea is dharma. Now, dharma. And the Gita says, Bhavaniyatam karma, action based on your self-nature. Be true to yourself. Now, this has been, in many parts of the world, morality has been, thou shalt not do this, In India, it's debated. Everything is debated. And even our great epics present you with different exemplars of good and bad dharma. And, for instance, in the Mahabharata, the so-called bad character is Duryodhan. But in modern India, we've had this wonderful interpretation written by a playwright from the Northeast, which has been performed by Auroville kids, which presents the point of view of Duryodhan. He has a point of view. So you can explore the point of view of any character, because there must be some sort of a way the being found a way to act. You know what I mean? And that's dharma. Dharma is a debated concept. It's not right and wrong. Right and wrong is a duality. Truth transcends that duality. And to pursue truth, one thing that Mother says, we want the truth. What most men want, they define as truth. Aurovillians must want the truth, whatever it may be. So it's not truth as I define it, but I must create a law of ideal perfection for myself and my action by creating a dharma for myself. So one of the things when we started to teach history in the school, particularly the history of religions. I bought a whole bunch of Bibles and we read the Bible as a piece of literature. And then I expected the children to understand what was the dharma of those people when they made the choices they did. And we didn't decide right and wrong. The kids had to figure this out. We just explored it, which means you need to explore it, you need to think profoundly, think deeply, get to the bottom of it, cut out all the obscurantism, and arrive at a guide and a position for your step, the next step and the 100th step. But it's hitching your wagon to some sort of a direction. So everyone must find a dharma. In the early years, one of my issues with the parents was, and as you can see from me, I have views and I express them. So one of my arguments with the parents was, please give your kids standards. Many of the parents in Auroville said, no, the kids are free. I said, you cannot do that. Life finds the lowest level. Please give them a standard, but tell them it's your standard. Then tell them they have the right to find their own standard. But give them a standard, which means dharma is a kind of a journey towards self-finding, but it's a frame. And the frame can keep widening, but you do need a frame to act. So what is the Auroville dharma? It's each one finding the step that they need in the truest. Auroville only works if you seek sincerity. If Aurovillians are not sincere, and many of our problems in Auroville come from the lack of sincerity of individual Aurovillians. This is a society full of problems, and we should not pretend they're not there. But it's Aurovillians not being very sincere. So you need to have a standard, and your standard should be as sincere as it can possibly be in the given moment. We always have little, who is sincere on earth? None of us is. As long as we are human, we are betraying something. But there is a law. And we are governed by that law, which we create for ourselves. That was a very long answer to your question, but... Yes?
I'm wondering about humility. I don't think it has a kind of sneaker-looking outlook question, but I've experienced myself very often. Even when I intellectually feel like I'm only a sort of server, or at least, in consequence of humility, then I'm part of something which I find really very amazing. My experience is not that humility, to be honest with you. And I wonder how that works something organized.
Have you seen Mother's books on flowers? Well, she's fabulous, no? She's worked on so many fields. She's given names to all the vegetation that was brought before her. And she says it represents a consciousness. Look at what she's called humility. It's a weed that grows out of wild grass. And it's just everywhere. It's so beautiful. It's humility. You look at gratitude, the flower, you just touch it and it disappears. It's the least present. You have to balance humility with the idea that aham brahmasmi, I am the divine. But then if you are the divine, can you measure up to divinity? Can the divine be egoistic? Can the divine harm somebody else? If you are truly that, then there are things you just can't do if you are true to that. So you are nothing. There in Hindi we have Krishna saying, "Main to kuch bhi nahi aur main sab kuch hu." Only the divine can be nothing, because the divine is everything. Those of you who don't know Hindi, I said, Krishna, there's a remark that Krishna is supposed to make, I am nothing because I am everything. It works better in Hindi. Are you Hindi speaking? Okay. That's the Auroville flower. The power of supramental perfection.
Now, sir, there are maybe about 3 questions here. But we'll slowly.
Let's wind up, yes. Yes. Yes.
Okay, it's about the Karma Yoga. Yoga work. Right?
Well, for us, it's yoga work.
Yes.
For us.
Yes.
It can include many other things, But the best definition of karma yoga comes in the Bhagavad Gita, when Sri Krishna explains to Arjuna what he expects him to do. And remember, in the Bhagavad Gita, Sri Krishna is telling him to kill. So that's his action. That Arjuna has to take up the sword and kill. And that's his karma yoga. And he has to do it. How is he going to kill in the consciousness of yoga is what the Bhagavad Gita is about. So karma yoga depends on the person, the moment, the particular world circumstance, the time. It can depend on many of those things. You cannot fix it. But for us in Auroville, it's through our work, but our work as an offering, as a means of self-giving, not as something I am doing, but it's my best contribution that I can presently make to the collective.
I met this young Aurovillian when I arrived, and he said, did you notice many Aurovillians don't smile? I said, yes. So I said, because they are doing the camera, he said, yes. So I thought that's the work here. I have to do my job. So to work with conscience, maybe you have to find conscience. I mean, you have to be conscious, and then you can do everything with conscience. Is there a mistake about that? That's my question.
No, the fact that people don't laugh, smile, it's a joke in Auroville also. But I assure you, it's 30 years ago, it was even worse. No. No, but you know, sometimes when you're wanting to show that you're sincere, maybe then too much of laughter gives a wrong impression. I don't know. I guess people have to figure this out for themselves. But it is true, you know, my father, who's no longer alive, who was in Auroville for many years, it used to upset him enormously that people would not smile. So he would make it a point. But he would do something even more. He would make the person, you know, hello, good morning. I mean, he was so persistent. But he was very particular.
We have a few more questions.
Yes.
So Deepti, I have this question about sincerity that you mentioned. Yeah. So Deepti mentioned about the importance of audience being sincere, and I think that applies to everything in Veritas, isn't it? So when we believe in something, we have to give 100% more to make it really work. On that note, I think you guys also have a similar idea to make everybody understand and make them be really sincere and then step in, right? So we all know the problems as a community or is facing with the lack of sincerity with the community members itself. They had when they came in, probably they were really involved when they came in, probably died out. And naturally, as human beings, we kind of lose, like how we gain faith in something, we also lose faith in something eventually for whatever reason. But they still decide to stay. This is what they chose, so they remain here. But obviously it's not helping the community any further, isn't it? And in my opinion, what if this grows, like how I volunteered in Matrimonial Gardens first time, and we understood how important it is to be weed. We finish one garden, we come around and it's already full of weeds again. So it was a never ending, we went around, around Matrimonial. It was interesting to observe this in the community also, right? So is there anything Auroville is working on or has already done or is something going on already to fix this issue inside the community? I'm not talking about removing, I'm not talking about removing people or I'm not talking about...
Can I give you a very interesting answer to this?
Yeah.
You know that Auroville is not meant for the best human beings. It's meant to be a representative society, which means every kind of human problem that exists in human society should be present. If it's a laboratory experiment, it needs to be worked upon in a small laboratory. So people are not joining Auroville because they are the best. Sometimes they are the problem, or maybe all the time it's because we have something to be worked out. So imagine that if you're creating a laboratory experiment, you want to get every type into the mixture so that you can concentrate it and work upon it. So it's the impossibility that makes you possible to be in Auroville. If you see it like that, and you don't see it as a mentally organized society, you recognize that there is a supreme divinity, and that right now in human evolution, it is possible to do such an experiment. It would make sense then that that which presides over human evolution has gathered into this concentrated place all the problems. So one way to look at Auroville is a concentration of difficulties. And Aurovillians have talked about that. That we are a concentration of all the impossibilities in the world. A friend of mine, he's passed away, Namas, we used to joke, oh my God, Auroville is the museum of the past. The moment an idea is dead in the world, it turns up in Auroville. I mean, we are, as Dinesh says, the only way to survive in Auroville is to have a huge sense of humor. And rather than notice other people's insincerity, notice your own. Because the only way to remove it in another is to remove it in yourself. Because you can only see it in someone else if you have it in yourself. That's kind of a yogic law. So the field of work is yourself. And you recognize that we are all impossible. So it changes the, it's not a mentally organized society, certainly. We didn't choose each other, we landed with each other.
What you said was like really beautiful, that that we constant need of reading, and I think it's beautiful.
Except in ourselves.
But we need to read out.
We need to read ourselves.
Like a dog's tail that.
There is one of the nice conversations, she talks that in the 70 or 71, says that India is the representation of all the difficulties of the world. Then that's why you were made to start also.
Yes, and Auroville is a concentration also. It's 1 hour.
Can we get to the last one?
Yes.
Should be waiting since a while.
What you said about the way you taught history, I wanted to know what was the outcome of this experimental teaching when you revised it in the light of Auroville's philosophy, and you taught them from
So we discover what we discovered. I mean, all my old friends have stopped teaching. So there's just 1 or 2 of us left in the teaching domain in Auroville. But what we've discovered is that there are moments that we know, known history. There are moments where there is a kind of a light, a luminous moment, a moment of great change. You look at ancient Athens.
Can I interrupt? I mean, specifically I'm thinking, because I have kids, and as an Indian, I studied Indian history till class 10, and then we studied world history, which is mainly European history. So I've been wondering, what history do you study here, especially if you think of yourself as people without a nation? So, and then what is the outcome of that? So do the students pass out with a sense of not having a nationhood?
You need to talk to the kids. This answer only the kids can give, because they are the
as
ones.
a teacher, what?
All right, I don't stop being Indian. My center of,
History.
yeah.
They must have a different sense of history.
Well, first of all, we don't use the textbooks that exist in the world, and yet we can use. I find literature a wonderful means to do history. So one of the periods through literature I study is the French Revolution. Of course, as you can see, I'm fascinated by those revolutionaries and that period. Shobindeau also has some very interesting things. One of the guides for us is Shobindeau's perspective. He's spoken a lot. If you read Shobindeau's writings, you get a lot of material which you can develop. So my education began when I came to the feet of Shobindeau. And he continues to be my teacher, and if I have a question, I go to him to get the answer. And it's a library. I can get answers on many areas. But we follow the lights, and there are lights all over the world.